Now, this is from a recording I made in June, and all of this stuff is reaching ahead now. So without further ado, I want to bring you this groundbreaking interview with Pete Peterson, which I summarized in this tribute video that I shot back in July in a beautiful location in Colorado. And I'll add one more thing, which is you might actually see the infamous Sasquatch in the forest. So be on the lookout for that. I like to have a little bit of fun with this. It's not all just so serious and somber. And I want to thank you for watching. This video is sponsored by the Wilcock Foundation, which is our 501c3. Hi there, I'm David Wilcock, and we hiked up to 10,000 feet altitude. We didn't hike the whole 10,000 feet, but it's a lot of work getting in here. And it's raining. But you know, we got to keep this show on the road. We're in a very beautiful place here. You see the mountains and the lake and the trees. And I have a very sad announcement to make. You may have already seen this in the title of the video, but Pete Peterson has died. He was my #1 insider. I met him through Project Camelot in 2009, and he became the #1 guy teaching us about the Alliance, which is this international coalition that is working to defeat what has been called the Illuminati, the New World Order, the Deep State, whatever names you want to use. Way before QAnon, which only started in October 2017. In 2009, I was getting briefings from Pete Peterson about this alliance. Just to give you a backstory, in case you didn't know who he is and why this is significant, Pete Peterson did work for the Reagan administration. He was a part of what's called Majestic, which is a lot more than 12 guys. It's not just Majestic 12. And one of the secrets is the spelling of Majestic with J refers to Her Majesty, because all this is ultimately being controlled by the British Empire. Now, what do I mean, all this? Pete Peterson claimed to have worked in highly compartmentalized programs in which UFOs are commonly known to exist within the military-industrial complex.
And it sounds crazy to most people. You know, there are people out there denying your credentials, denying that you really did and said the things that you did and said. But I've met multiple insiders through you that you introduced me to who have confirmed many of the things that you've said as being true and totally real.
Well, they never did like me to talk much about it, and I never did talk much about it. And then those people have since passed away. I mean, I've been doing this since I was about 18 years old.
Right.
And interestingly enough, he was involved in a program called White Star Ranch from childhood, in which he was trained to interact with extraterrestrials directly. This is something that's been going on within the secret government since at least the 1950s. There were treaties in place, secret treaties. We don't really know how far back this stuff goes. I've heard from certain insiders that there were extraterrestrials materializing in all of the offices of the presidents of the United States going back to the Revolutionary War, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Do we have people coming up the trail? Okay, no, good.
Not at the moment. I mean, they probably won't be able to be heard.
Yeah. Ooh, we got some thunder there. So this is a guerrilla shoot. We're just doing this out in public, but it's a beautiful place. We got bugs, we got rain, we got thunder, but we're going to keep moving forward. So there were treaties in place with various extraterrestrials, and they were in the process of developing a secret space program. Now, Pete knew a lot about this. Pete worked with the actual individuals in various alphabet soup agencies that were doing this stuff. He got to meet firsthand with extraterrestrials, and they taught him how to develop anti-gravity. They didn't like working with adults. They preferred children because children didn't have this kind of mental interference of anger and stress and depression that they disliked so much. So anyway, Pete came out to the open in 2009. He had worked for the Reagan administration. He became their top advisor on classified technology. Now we're really getting some rain here.
Hail.
This is crazy. It's a little bit of hail.
The trees and then come back.
Well,
The trees will be pretty protected.
we're doing fine. I think we're, unless I really get saturated, we'll keep going. So it's sad because he died, you know, and I didn't know if we were going to get a chance to talk to him again. He had told me that he was now cleared by his allies to start talking about the 35 different, I believe it was 35, something like that, different off-planet locations. Yeah, this is crazy. We're getting dumped.
Yeah, this is crazy. We're getting dumped. This is a gorilla shoot.
So yeah, we're getting pouring rain and hail. We're in the middle of a place where it would take us an hour and a half to hike out of here. I was hoping we wouldn't get any rain, but we are. So we got to just keep the tribute to Pete going, I guess. So the White Star Ranch thing was interesting. They brought him in as a young kid, and they started to have him intern with all these different scientists. So he would do 6 months of training and then 6 months of actual hands-on work. And he worked with a lot of different interesting people in that process. And as a result, his claim was that he had the equivalent of multiple PhDs in different disciplines. And they taught him, most importantly, they taught him all about this classified technology. A whole lot of stuff. Well, look at that. The rain is easing. That's nice. They taught him a whole lot of classified technology, a whole lot of stuff that regular folks like you and I couldn't get our hands on. And his dissertation was on something called the informational field. So one of the things that was so interesting, when we went out there in 2009 to interview with Pete for the first time with Project Camelot, he was really amazed because I was talking about something called the source field, and I was putting that book together, and I had lots and lots of information that paralleled his very nicely. And in fact, when my source field book came out, a lot of his colleagues in the DIA and other places said that they had never seen anybody nail so much of this classified science in a book before. And again, you know, people say David has no evidence, but you look at source field investigations, it's got 1,000 academic references. You look at Synchronicity Key, it's got over 700. And then the third book, I believe, is over 400. So Pete Peterson told us so much stuff. One of the things that was really intriguing was that there was apparently a facility being built around the White House for 35 different races of extraterrestrial beings that they are apparently getting ready to introduce us to at some point in the future. Okay, we got more interference, but it is now not raining, so let's just make sure they don't steal our stuff. Okay, they're just down there.
Back there.
Yeah, let's go back to our other shoot location now that we've lost the rain.
Well, maybe you can just pick up. You know the reason.
So Pete Peterson was part of a secret government program called White Star Ranch. And White Star Ranch was interesting because what they did is they got kids who were young and they brought them in to be trained by interesting PhDs that had access to classified science. So if you think that classified science is a recent thing, that would be incorrect. Classified science goes all the way back to guys like John Ernst Worrell Keeley in the late 1800s, who demonstrated a flying platform that used tuning forks and sound. There was some type of acoustic system that he found that created anti-gravity with the combination of electrogravitics. And he navigated the craft by sound. That all got lost. One of the great early sites on the internet about free energy was called KeelyNet, and it was a whole site dedicated to the work of John Keeley. Obviously, the work of Nikola Tesla was classified. He was exiled ultimately, and after he died, They went in and they got all of his papers. So that was in the 1940s, and apparently Einstein was working on stuff that he did not make public regarding the manipulation of the space-time fabric, as he called it. And Pete Peterson was able to be brought in as a very trained person because Pete's grandfather, I believe, was Nikola Tesla's lab assistant in Colorado. So Pete's grandfather got to learn all kinds of really cool stuff about what was really going on with science. And Tesla, of course, was way, way ahead of his time. He had wireless electricity. He had all kinds of cool things, anti-gravity. There was a Tesla anti-gravity craft where lightning bolts would come off of it and hit metal as he was flying it. So Pete Peterson already had a really robust knowledge of science, and they brought him in and they started to train him in this White Star Ranch program. Unfortunately, he only opened up to me right near the end, right as we started to get rain, and when I was telling you this last time, he only opened up to me at the end about the fact that he had been brought to many off-planet locations, and I forget the number that he told me off the top of my head, but I believe it was more than 35.
You also told me not too long ago that you have been on, you said that you have had 60 to 65 different off-planet locations that you actually visited, and that now you're authorized to talk about it, whereas before you weren't. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. There's some things I can talk about. There are quite a few of them that I know because I'm contacting them. I'm making a radio that can contact them, and it's a whole new type of radio. It'll be a whole new type of cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't talk about that in the past because he was under strict non-disclosure agreements with various agencies like the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, which seems to have been one of the main groups that he was working with based on various small things that he told me. So again, anybody who tries to say that Pete Peterson is a fake or a phony has not done the homework. I spent 2 hours at a time on the phone with Pete at least once a week up until he had this catastrophic injury last year where he hit his head on a toilet. He passed out in a bathroom, and when he came to, he was effectively a stroke victim who had lost his mind.
But when I had my stroke, I was passed out for 3 weeks entirely, and then for 2 months I didn't know who I was. I knew how to take care of myself in many ways, but there were a lot of things that I didn't know.
Right.
And then that all came back like just one night. Boom. They were giving me some new medicines, and it brought it all back.
Right.
And they quit giving them to me, and it quit coming back.
Huh.
So as a result, I couldn't remember the name of my favorite shopping store, which is Red Meyer.
Right.
And it's took me almost a year to be able to remember that name.
Wow.
Even though I could drive to it, I could go to it and go shopping, tell you where it was located, but I could not tell you the name of that store or save my ass.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, his mind came back after, I think, like 6 months. And during that time, during those 6 months, I'd spoken to him a couple times, and he was in a delusional state of consciousness. He was saying really bizarre stuff, talking about fishes and aquariums. He was on some weird fish trip. So it's been a long road here with Pete, and the off-planet locations that he'd been to were for purposes of training. So extraterrestrials apparently were bringing the trainees out to their own planets or their own bases and their own ships. And it was a really interesting reveal when Pete finally let me know this, only after he had recovered from his stroke. And he had said that this is something he had just told me, that if this had gone down within the next 6 months, all the D-class stuff that's getting ready to happen. If we could make it through the next 6 months, he was going to be able to talk about anything he wanted.
All right, well, let me get together with Uncle and see what I can and what I can't say.
Okay, that sounds good.
But I think I'm going to be able to say a lot within 6 to 8 months. I'll be able to say everything.
Really? Why 6 to 8 months?
That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. If Trump re-wins the election, I'll be able to talk about anything.
Wow. Okay.
And as much as, all this stuff that's going on Trump, daily, you got all the damn shows are like half plus, positive for Trump and half negative.
Right.
All the news shows.
Right.
And the news shows have to admit that there's stuff that they had that was negative for Trump, and this Russian thing and all that stuff is all absolute bullshit.
Yep, that's true.
He spent like $400 million revamping the military base we have at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba.
Right.
Which is a military prison.
Right. Yeah, I know.
He's revamping that to put all the banksters and gangsters into prison.
Right.
And I'm telling you this right now in July 2019. So basically, what Pete was getting from his insider briefings was that by 2020, he would be able to share any information that he wanted to share. He could say anything he wanted to say. It was all going to be accessible to us. So we were really looking forward to that. They were fixing up his teeth. They were getting him ready for some kind of public debut. And he had given us so much information. He was the main insider contact teaching us about the Alliance. So let's talk about that a little bit. Pete went through all this White Star Ranch training, and he is one of very, very few people you would ever actually find. We've had LARPers try to say this, but it's very, very rare that you would actually have somebody work for the CIA and the NSA and the DIA. Nearly impossible, okay? But that did happen in Pete's case, which is one of his very unique aspects. And in the course of Pete's many different intel experiences, he got to see a lot of interesting stuff. Pete did go to Antarctica, and he went down to the mothership that was down there. Some of the best information that we have on that Antarctic mothership is from Pete. It was gigantic in size, and it had many, many other ships in it that were smaller in size. The smaller ships looked like the Vimanas that we hear about from the Hindu scriptures, and specifically, they looked like things like the stupas that you see in the Tibetan Buddhist literature. So that is an interesting thing. He talked about how the motherships had mouths on either side. We're getting interference again. I'm sorry about that. It's unavoidable. There were mouths on either side, and the smaller ships would come in, and then there were they would have little holding dishes for them, actually. And then there was like a conveyor belt. So whatever ship it was that needed to land would come on this conveyor belt, and then it would all rotate around inside. The ships were fascinating. The mothership that he saw in Antarctica was fascinating. They discovered, apparently quite by accident, that you could sing to it. You could sing to the hull of the ship. And depending on singing to it or talking to it, it would actually change form. And one of the things they discovered that it would repair itself. So after the ship had crashed, as they started to melt off the ice, he talked about how they took these huge bags of water, and then they would boil the water with very high intensity microwave beams. So they drop the bags, and then they boil them on the way down, and that's how they'd melt out the ice to get into an area they wanted to get into. So they melted out this area around the ship, and then they drained it out, and interestingly enough, the cracks from the ship having crashed would actually heal themselves as the ice got out of the cracks. The cracks would come together. So they found out that everybody inside the ship had their own room, and that the room had an area that was terraformed to appear like it's the outside. So you actually had grass you had land, you had fruit trees, and then they had this artificial kind of holodeck thing that made it look like you were outdoors. So talk about AAA accommodations, 5-star, 7-star hotel inside this mothership. So that was very cool. And he also was at a base down there, which he gave it kind of his own name based on the movie Ice Station Zebra. That's not really what it was called. There is a pro word for Antarctica, which I'm not going to share, because that's still one way that we can tell who really knows who's actually been there, the pro word is something that you talk about where it sounds like a normal thing, but then people on the inside are like, oh, you're talking about that. And one pro word that we have talked about is the plan. And the plan was something drawn up in the 1950s to defeat this cabal / Illuminati / deep state group that was so malevolent and destructive. So the Antarctica stories alone are quite fascinating, and I do have another insider that Pete introduced me to who also has been there and has experienced many of the same things. We heard about Antarctica from William Tompkins, we've heard about it from Emery Smith, we've heard about it from Corey Goode, I heard about it from people who don't want to talk, like Bruce and Jacob. We heard about it from our old Montauk insider, Daniel. That's going now back to 2003. That I first started to talk to him, I believe. 2004 was what it was. So anyway, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and Pete Peterson brought us so much wonderful information, so many things that were so fascinating, because there has always been a war on the inside about whether to tell us the truth or not. Anybody who thinks that the government could never keep a secret, they can't even hide a file in a filing cabinet, would be wise to remember that in the case of the development of the nuclear bomb with the Manhattan Project, you had 140,000 employees, I believe it was 120 or 140,000, some number like that, depends on which source you read. Let's say 140,000. 140,000 people working on the development of the nuclear bomb, so compartmentalized that until it exploded over Hiroshima, nobody knew we had it. They had it in multiple locations at multiple military bases, and they had signs up there that said, things like, what you do here, what you see here, what you say here, let it stay here. And it's like the hypnotic thing where it tells you in a rhyme, so it gets into your subconscious. Pete talked about working at the CIA and having mind-controlled shooters, lone gunmen, who were not the ones that it got pinned on necessarily, but they didn't remember doing the operation. And they would come back into the office and look at the television and see that there was this shooting tragedy that had happened, and they would actually walk in and say, oh my God, how horrible. This is such a tragedy. And everybody would remain quiet, and then as soon as the shooter left the room, they'd all start laughing. That was one of the things that led Pete to conclude that he had, quote-unquote, mud on his wheel of karma, that he wanted to come forward, he wanted to do right for humanity, and tell us what really had gone on and what he really learned. If you actually do an unbiased study of all the different insider testimonials, you will quickly see that this is not a lie. So when we have the authorized partial government disclosure going on through Tom DeLonge, through the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, in which they're focusing only on this 2004 USS Nimitz incident, where you have these tic-tac-looking UFOs that fly over the USS Nimitz. And we already know that during the initial launch, where they were trying to raise money, they had a picture of a helium balloon that was the number one in a Mylar balloon that was made out of silver, and they portrayed that in their fundraiser as if it was a tic-tac UFO. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but it stands to reason that that could be construed as investment fraud, because they were portraying that as a picture of this UFO that they were talking about, and now you can't find the video anywhere. They scrubbed it off the internet. So they've already gotten caught in that, and they tried to raise a lot of money, but they only got $1,026,000. So when you have to put in your social security number and you have to do all this crazy stuff and submit to a background check just to invest $200 in this venture, people weren't too keen on that. So that's kind of like what we're seeing now is the restriction of free speech on the internet. We're seeing it like crazy. I wrote a whole book on this called D-Class, and I highly recommend going back and reading that. It's 6 sections long, 53,000 words, 180 pages. It is a book. That'd be kind of a small book, but still, it's a book. So there's so much going on right now in which YouTube as a whole has been modified as a delivery system for mainstream media content, which I guess would be good for you if you wanted to have cable, because now you don't need to pay for cable. You can get it on YouTube for free, right? They're just pushing it on us now, but there's probably still reasons to have cable as well. You know, stuff you're not going to get on YouTube. But then that's the YouTube Premium, I guess, you know. So anyway, we are being attacked. We are being shadow banned. We are having all of our links banned. It's crazy how much big tech is attacking us. But don't let this fool you. It is happening because we are winning. It is happening because disclosure is happening. And it is happening because we are getting towards the victory. In other words, Pete said that unless our president gets impeached, within 6 months he could talk about everything he knows. No restrictions. That's 2020. So there's something that was going to go on between now and the end of the year that would make it just open season for insiders. And so we all have a role to play in that process. We, as intelligent citizens, are working together to have disclosure. We want the truth, and there are some mitigating circumstances around what happened to Pete Peterson that I do feel we should talk about. So let's do that for a second, because this is valuable information that I feel does need to be shared. And it's why I hiked up 10,000 feet, you know, out to this wonderful location to give you this. So there's another insider that I've talked about before. His code name was Woody. I didn't use the code name, but now it doesn't matter because he's also dead. And so therefore, there's no need to try to save him from being killed because he was killed, okay? Now, Woody was apparently the top person in the Western world with the Western governmental apparatus, okay, and whatever forms it is, both secret and overt, who was the signatory for any deals that were done with the real financial powers behind the Asians. This is the Dragon family. Okay, so had to stand up for a while because things are starting to get sore on that rock. But I wanted to tell you guys about another interesting angle of how this whole Pete Peterson situation has played out. It's important for me to note this, that first of all, let's look to the QAnon post from July the 9th. And on that post, it says, "Gold shall destroy Fed." And that they have the gold. Now, it is very interesting to note that, and July 9th is just a few days ago as the time that we're taping right now, okay? It is very interesting to note that that information corresponds precisely with data that we got from another insider who, for the purposes of this video, we will call Ward. I've talked to you guys about Ward before. I've talked to you about the fact that there is a financial ruling group in Asia that calls themselves the Dragon family because they were the original dragon emperors of China. The Qing dynasty, which is what China is named after, Qin, that's where it comes from. And the original province is called Xi'an, Xian, which again is where this all started. There's over 120 pyramids in this Chinese area, and the terracotta soldiers were found inside one of those pyramids. They actually had to excavate and destroy the pyramid to find the entire army of the emperor that had been preserved inside. So the dragon family apparently are extraterrestrial humans. They look Asian, but they are not from Earth. There apparently are multiple planets that have humans that look pretty much exactly like people you would see on Earth. And that's one of the many really interesting things that we're going to learn as time goes on. We've definitely heard about the people with the elongated skulls. There is a huge part of the Cabal's mythology, which they believe to be true. They have the motherships in Antarctica. They have the books from there. They have the ruins. And they believe that they are the descendants of people who crash landed in Antarctica and then developed out. The crash landing was 55,000 years ago, one of the main ones. They developed out across the Earth. They had a major catastrophe 50,000 years ago. There was another one 25,000 years ago. And then there was another one 12,500 years ago. So these are cyclical. It's a 25,000 year cycle, and it has to do with the sun giving off a huge flash of electrical and bright, fiery energy. So the geologist Robert Schoch has done some really cool work in his book Forgotten Civilization on this idea of the solar flash being what ended Atlantis. And there's a lot of really cool information about this, including this 5-inch thick layer of ash throughout most of the northern hemisphere that is all the result of this solar eruption. The solar flash apparently caused the Earth to shift on its axis, and where these people had settled, which they had called Antarctica, they called Atlantis, became Antarctica. Anyway, so that's like one group, people with elongated skulls. We've talked about this quite a bit in my other videos. The descendants of people from Atlantis that spread out, and there were two, this is another really important new piece of information. 2 lines, okay? They had slightly different physiologies as well, because apparently one group may have originated on the exploded planet that has been called Tiamat or Maldek. The other group may have been originated on Mars. So anyway, there were 2, this is some of the newest briefings that we've gotten. There were 2 surviving groups from this ancient civilization in our solar system. There were people, they both had elongated skulls, but one of them had more of a ski slope on the head, and the other one had more of a bony knot here. And you can see examples of both types of skulls, and especially in Mesoamerica, we see lots of these skulls that have been found, which is a very, very interesting study. And then in Egypt, of course, we see this same thing happening with the pharaohs, with Akhenaten, Nefertiti, their daughter Meritaten. There's several really great stone-carved heads of her in places like the Berlin Museum, where you get like undeniable, she has no hair, the skull is almost twice as long as ours, and it's just fascinating. So what we're now finding out is we don't really know if one of them was on the exploded planet, one of them was on Mars, but there were 2 family lines, and they were warring with each other. They might have even caused this war that blew up their planet, but warring between each other. They actually both survived. Both groups crash landed on Earth, and they eventually agreed to divide the Earth, and so one line went up through Africa, Europe, and kind of like the western part of Asia, let's say. The other group went up through the Americas and apparently to some degree pushed into Eastern Asia as well. And again, they have different skulls, and they ran the planet, and they probably had some wars. They lost contact with each other after the fall of Atlantis 12,500 years ago, the most recent solar flash, according to Robert Schoch. And in the aftermath of that catastrophe, they did not come back into contact until actually Columbus. Part of apparently why the Queen financed Columbus was to reunite these factions, because you have the people with the elongated skulls still living in the Vatican, imported from Egypt. And they used those mitre hats to conceal their identity. Most of them do not live above ground, though. They live in various secure facilities underground or otherwise outside of prying public eyes. We really know a lot less about the surviving priesthoods in Mesoamerica, where they went. They also had the elongated skulls. But we do know that they came back into contact with each other, starting with Columbus and those other marine expeditions. And eventually, this becomes the root of the Rothschild versus Rockefeller war. In other words, the Rothschilds were sort of the public face of the European faction of the people with the elongated skulls, and the Rockefellers had made treaties with the American factions of people with elongated skulls. So then you have a third party. You have this other group that also came here apart from these two warring factions, and that's the Dragon family. They arrived far more recently. They had really cool technology, and they figured out the best place to come and land to be able to get the gold. So one of the things we've heard for so long is that the Dragon family has 14.5 Olympic swimming pools worth of gold at least, whereas the official gold on the books is only 1 Olympic-sized swimming pool. So that gets pretty amazing to think about, like, wow, where is all this gold and how much wealth is that? It's staggering. And this gets into things like the collateral accounts, money that has been hidden away in various underground bases and so forth. My poor wife is getting eaten alive over there. We are really fighting hard to get you this information in this nice spot. So anyway, the Dragon family also has obviously their own underground facilities where they're manufacturing craft, UFOs. They're doing really cool stuff with that. And so when you start talking about the Dragon family, you're talking about the dynastic Asian bloodlines that have a lot more money than anybody else, including the Cabal, really. They're much more wealthy than the Cabal. And there's been this war between the Dragon family and the Cabal. It's gone on for quite some time. It never really has resolved. It's still ongoing. So anyway, the real battle to resolve our planet is going to come down to an agreement that has to be made between the Cabal, the Deep State, whatever you want to call it, and this Dragon family. They have to come out with some kind of an agreement, and the Dragon family wants us to have full disclosure, full access to the technology. They want prosperity for everybody. They want to clean up the planet. They want to get us into space. All these amazing things. That's the Dragon family's goal, okay? And they are working very hard on that goal, including circumventing all of the classified programs to bring us a hover car. That you will have a hover car in your garage, and that at its maximum speed, you're looking at being able to go anywhere in America in 90 seconds and anywhere in the world in 7 to 9 minutes. That's how fast these things go. So that is being worked on right now. I know this for an absolute fact, that this is all being put together in the works.
What happened was I was having dinner at a restaurant here in Boise where I had been having some meetings with people that are in the business of building flying saucers.
Okay.
For all intents and purposes. They're aircraft. But 22 years ago, they built 3,500 of them. 2,500 of them were sent to Mars, and 1,500 of them were put on the backside of the moon. And they are spacecraft. They travel at Mach 17.
Yeah, we've talked about this. Okay. I know who these people are. Yep.
Right. And you know the fellow that did that.
Yep. We're good friends, thanks to you. So.
Yes. So here's what happened when I was having this meal with a group of people that I had been working with on there's a new flying saucer, we don't call it a flying saucer, it's a new craft.
Right.
It's not a normal craft.
Right.
And it flies at about Mach 44. And it's coming out to replace one that was 23 years old now. And it was so far advanced there wasn't anything necessary. Now,
so Mach 44 means 44,000 miles an hour? What does it actually mean?
Well, Mach 44 is 560 miles an hour times 44.
Oh, okay.
The one we did before, I flew once from a air base, I think it may be Davis Monson air base. I'm not sure if that's the right one or not, but anyway, it's down in the basin between San Francisco and Sacramento. And it's in a hole in the ground that's about 1.5 miles in diameter. And it's built down under the ground, and they take off out of there. They have a cloaking device that's good enough that you can't see them with your naked eye from, say, 1,000 feet.
Right.
And you don't have the number of rods and cones required to see them at that distance. And anyway, they take off from there. That's one of their bases that they take off from. It's right in the middle of, bean fields, basically.
Right.
It's at the end of the San Francisco Bay that comes in and goes all the way down to, down south of, it goes down to east of San Jose, almost, if not all the way east of San Jose. It comes under the big bridge there in San Francisco. San Francisco Bay Bridge. And then on the west side of it is Stanford University and all those little towns run down through there, Cupertino and et cetera, et cetera. And then on the other side of the bay is Hayward and Walnut Grove and Berkeley and so forth on the other side of the bay. And it's on the Berkeley side. It's between Berkeley and Sacramento. Out in an area that's, a lot of it is marshy fields, and the rest of it is up out of the water. Up out of the low water table. And but it's a hole in the ground that they just went around and around and around and shoved dirt out of it for years. And then built.
Why would they need to have this ship? Why would they need to have this ship so far down in a hole?
So people couldn't see it.
Right. Okay. And are you saying that there were bases that these ships were going to on Mars and the Moon?
Well, they were. They went from there. They also flew from here. Some of them went to Wright-Patterson. Some of them went to the air base there in the military base there in the Bay in Washington, D.C. A lot of them were runners that went up and up. Most of them, when they take off, they fly straight in the air. They go straight up.
Okay.
And so anyway, there were a lot of them went up and provided communication links. And
so why would you need to send ships to Mars or to the Moon? What was the purpose of sending them out there?
Purpose of it was to fight the Dracos.
Really?
They're from a different galaxy than we are. They're not from the galaxy that we're members of the Milky Way. And the people in that galaxy have a group, and most of them are people that have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, a nose, a couple of holes to breathe through. Some of them are very different than we are, but they have the same features,
right?
Just different. Like most fish have the same things, most snakes have the same thing, most rodents, most spiders, and spiders have 8 legs instead of 6, and or 4, but they're still, they have 2 eyes and 1 mouth and 1 rectum, and so they're all pretty much the same, different sizes by far. Mm-hmm. But anyway, as you get further out, obviously you get older than the people here in this galaxy, which is a fairly new galaxy.
Okay.
And so it's in the early stages of evolution compared to some of the others, and some of them are, the people are mechanical. They're biomechanical rather than just biological, which is an area that MIT especially has a group that have been working on building people that are biomechanical. They have computers for brains, which we don't talk about at all.
Right.
And the Dracos are basically, Draco meaning dragon. They're basically, you would say they're of a dragon family rather than a human family. Some have 6 legs, some have 4, or some have 2 legs and 2 arms. But most of them have 4 arms and 2 legs, or 4 legs and 2 arms.
Do they walk like a beast, or do they walk upright?
They walk both ways.
Huh. I'd never heard about Dracos with 6 limbs before. That's interesting.
Well, they're a best kept secret. They haven't been talked about much. But when you go to a meeting where they're being represented by members of the Galactic Association, where you find, that the ones that are the furthest off are the ones I appreciate the most. Their ancestors are about 6.5 feet tall, and they're praying mantises.
Right.
And their eyes are on the end of stalks. They have a head like a hammerhead shark in a way. Their eyes are on the end of stalks that stick out where their ears would normally come out.
Right.
They have multiple plates in their mouth instead of teeth, and they speak through a couple of organs that are about where our kidneys are, and they vent air through a series of vents in the back, in their back, and they can tighten and loosen the bands, these flat bands that cover those, and they can sound exactly like a human.
Really? There's no problem with the way the voice sounds?
Well, it sounds a little funny, and it comes from their back instead of their front, but
right.
It gets pretty loud.
Huh. Do you think there are steps being made now that we're going to be introduced to these people at some point fairly soon?
I think so.
Right.
I think if Trump stays in, we may get a chance to hear about them.
Do you still get any briefings?
I haven't had any new briefings, let's put it that way. I mean, I've had briefings about old people and stuff like that, and then on these new ships that I'm building, I am building controls that are usable by us and by different other peoples that are members of our Galactic Association.
Right.
And they're building 3,500, and then they're building another, like about 2,250 that will go out to the moon.
So what is so amazing is that there is a particular place in America where the Dragon family representatives have been coming out at various times to meet and discuss the formation of a new financial system. And this, I've heard about various meetings through this insider that we're calling Ward. I've never spoken to Ward directly. I only spoke to him through another insider. Okay? Ward had a meeting which culminated on July 9th, in which the Dragon family and the representatives of the Western establishment have now signed off on that financial agreement that will give us gold-backed currency, that will get us our freedom back, that will get us classified technology, all these wonderful things. That agreement was signed on July the 9th. A day and a half after Ward signed that agreement, he was found face down dead in his house. And he had promised me that he was going to talk to me if the time became right after the agreement was ratified and it became publicly known. I have seen pictures of Ward with the Dragon family. I am not going to share those pictures, not even with the faces blocked out, because I don't know what kind of compromising information could be in there that I wouldn't even know about. But Ward died on the same day that Pete died, Pete Peterson, and that, to me, is very suspect. I don't know if Pete was knocked off. It is strange that when I talked to him last, which was only a couple weeks ago, about this whole idea that I had stolen his money from the fundraiser, and I have recordings of him saying that's not true, that he did receive all of the money, which his take of it was $55,000, then GoFundMe got the rest.
So let's just, for the sake of this silly thing, let's just talk more about the money. So the money, you can confirm again, the money did go into your account.
Well, I don't know that it did or not, but I do know that about $55,000 did.
Well, that was the entirety of the fundraiser minus the cut that GoFundMe took. So yes, that is the full amount.
People who are making this stuff up out of no evidence, they're doing it just because they like trolling, they like attacking us, and they think this is a game. People are dying. You know, we were threatened very severely with actual terrorism at the Contact in the Desert event. I was concerned every time I went on stage. I couldn't turn my back on the audience. We had a massive security presence. They were unarmed, but we had armed guards that were on call, ready to come into the room from local police. And so if people think that this is all a joke and that nobody's dying and nobody's getting hurt, look at what just happened to Pete and look at what happened to Ward on the same exact day, folks. And then what's interesting also is, we should also talk about this, that the arrest of Uncle Jeffy, let's call him that, because we don't want to say certain words or else this video will never be seen. But if you think about Uncle Jeffy, you know what I'm talking about. Uncle Jeffy has an island that goes on that island that we don't like, okay? So we'll leave it at that. And you know what I'm talking about, because he was very publicly arrested last Saturday as the time that we're doing this video, which is exactly 1 week ago. Now what's interesting is that for the 2 days before Uncle Jeffy was arrested, we had, first on Independence Day itself, a massive earthquake right underneath the China Lake base, which nobody even knows about. It's almost as big as Area 51. BLM cordons off the whole thing. You can't go in there. There's nowhere you can go. But the whole thing is this really elaborate UFO base. It's got all kinds of stuff underground. It's got all kinds of stuff above ground. If you look at it, you got Edwards Air Force Base below, you got China Lake, and then you got Nellis right over here. And they're all in that big area where nobody gets to go. The BLM will tell you, oh, well, it's true. I mean, 85% of all the above ground weapons testing is done in this area. So they tell you, well, if you go in there, you're going to get blown up, turn around. So nobody knows about China Lake. Well, isn't it interesting that we have an earthquake on Independence Day, of all things, that makes China Lake non-functional as a base? And then another one happens the next day, July 5th, that's even bigger. And I was lying down in bed meditating at 8:19 p.m. For some reason, I was inspired to go to bed, get on my bed, lie down, close my eyes. I heard this dog going crazy outside in the neighborhood, shrieking like coyotes were, like a pack of coyotes. It was the weirdest dog thing I've ever heard. The dog finally stopped. I laid down. Not even 5 minutes goes by, and I hear this very loud pulse, this very loud roar. Sounded almost like a bowling ball going down a bowling lane, but like 1,000 miles an hour, underground. It went woof. And then right as the sound impact came to my house, the paintings on my walls hit the wall. That's how I knew I wasn't just getting some meditative experience. This was totally real. And then only a few seconds later, the whole room starts shaking up and down. It was very vivid, very scary. Plus, I was in the upstairs of my house, and the upstairs already shakes a lot just from the wind. So when you get an earthquake in that room, it's really, really rough. So that scared the bejesus out of me. That's part of why I came back to Colorado, honestly. If there's going to be any more earthquakes, I'd rather not be there while they're happening. And we got some deals that we're working on that are about to come to fruition, but I'm out here to finish my book. Got 3 weeks to do that. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. The point is, those two quakes completely destroyed the mission capability of China Lake. And I found an insider that's in my latest article that I highly recommend. Go to divinecosmos.com, divinecosmos.com. That's my website. And click on the article called It Begins. I want you to read D-Class too, but definitely read It Begins. And in that article, I'm talking about the fact that some very strange stuff has been reported by whistleblowers going on at China Lake. A provable long-term track record of chemtrail experimentation, weather modification. That was the hub of it. So my theory was, what if they had some other doomsday aerosol that they could launch in planes that would basically either create mass hysteria or everybody that has a weak immune system dies, something really horrible like that. Because if Uncle Jeffy gets arrested and you look at his dossier of who got invited to his island, it is a who's who list of all the top people in the deep state. So this is not a joke. When Jeffy gets arrested, that's the moment that the deep state is willing to throw everything in the trash, ruin the planet. Apparently they also tried to create a doomsday nuclear weapon launch from a Russian sub. The Russians in the sub disabled the weapon before it could be launched, and in so doing they all lost their lives. But it did not go into fusion, thank goodness. And we applaud and praise them for their heroic sacrifice. A lot of people are dying right now. This is the peak of the war. It's a World War III, a shadow World War III. So again, if there are chemtrail planes there, and if they did have a doomsday aerosol, this strike would stop it. Not to mention, we don't know what other kind of trafficking was going on from there. There's all kinds of reports from the original Fritz Springmeier books about the Illuminati, of extensive trafficking of humans underneath China Lake and the underground parts. I mean, it's anybody's guess, all the crazy stuff that was going on there, but we do know that apparently Edwards, China Lake, and Nellis were the three main paperclip areas for the Germans that got transported here after World War II and really never lost their loyalty to their original party. So anyway, I'm hearing some storms and clouds, but we're going to keep going here. We're going to keep doing this for you because there's a lot of things I want to cover, and it's crazy and it's exciting, but it's scary, and then there's loss and there's pain and there's tears, and it's all kind of blending together right now. So I cannot believe that it's an accident that we see these two earthquakes that perfectly destroy China Lake, but like hardly anything else gets damaged. No civilian casualties. Maybe there's one guy they found under a pickup truck. They don't even know if it's from the earthquake or not. Even the town of Ridgecrest nearby doesn't seem to have been destroyed. But if you actually look at the news for the military for China Lake, they tell all non-essential personnel to leave, don't come back, go down to other bases because everything mission capable has been destroyed. So there's nothing left there. The earthquakes just wiped it out. These were bigger earthquakes, the second one in particular, bigger than Northridge 1994. And you look at the pictures of what Northridge did to LA, and it was tremendous devastation. So, and you notice they're not talking about China Lake at all. There's no pictures from there. There's no pictures of damage. Nobody's talking about this. Then they get Jeffy the next day. Now tell me that's an accident. And then the next day after that, there's this flooding that takes place in Washington, D.C. And it's so bad that you can't ride the subway. It's so bad that the basement of the White House is flooding. I do not think this was the alliance. I do not think this was the president's own people. I've had insiders tell me that the underground tunnels around D.C. are 3 times bigger than D.C. itself. And so it's possible, as my wife actually got this idea, that they could have floodgates in the Potomac River, that they can just open them up and flood out these underground tunnels as a doomsday step, coordinating it with some kind of rainfall attack, okay, so that what you get is all of this evidence washed away. So then that doesn't stop anything, and the very next day we lose Ross Perot. Now this is also really sad because Corey Good and I were contacted by a family member of Ross Perot's. I'm not going to say who. He was going to come to contact in the desert, actually, and we were in some negotiation about that at one point, and he was just going to be visiting, but obviously it would be a big deal and people would know who he was. We have strong reason to believe that Ross Perot had a lot to do with the bankrolling of earlier parts of the Alliance's effort in the 1990s and onward. That a lot of his money was going in, and that without him the Alliance effort could never have happened, okay? And we also had an offer for him to finance Above Majestic, and after he made that offer, he suddenly got sick, and he was no longer mentally capable of carrying through with the offer. So I find it very suspect that you have the China Lake earthquakes that destroy nothing else but these bases. You have Uncle Jeffy gets arrested the next day. It's all starting to unravel now. Who did he invite? What are the pictures they found in his Manhattan apartment when they smashed the doors open? What other kinds of documents did they find? What did they get out of his safe? What are they going to find on the island? What kind of crazy blackmail stuff did he have on people? How many sealed indictments are there? They unsealed an indictment, folks. They unsealed an indictment about Uncle Jeffy. A sealed federal indictment. This is happening. This is true. This is real, okay? So think about what the implications are here. Think about how we are being shown the fulfillment of everything we've been telling you was going to happen. You got people messing around with kids. You got this horrible stuff going on. There's linkages to all these other things, and it's all going to unfold very rapidly because, as I told you guys, apparently there's a hard deadline of September, mid-September, for all of these things, all these different things to be declassified. And then, as I told you, Pete had told me maybe a couple months ago that if we made it 6 more months without some major problem, that he would be able to talk about anything that he had ever seen. No restrictions. So we have Ross Perot, who had offered to help us, and then, he had also helped the Alliance to a great degree, and he's lost. And then the financial agreement goes through, I think the July 9th was like a Wednesday or something like that. I forget exactly what day of the week it was, but it was July 9th. And then Ward signs off on the new agreement for the new financial system that will free the planet. A day and a half later, they find him dead, face down, in his apartment, and Pete Peterson dies the same day. And so all 3 of these guys, Ross Perot, Ward, and Pete Peterson, are heroes. They deserve our respect. And it's very sad for me to have lost Pete. I considered him like a father. My father fought in Vietnam, had a very negative view of the military, as did a lot of people with the Woodstock and the hippie movement. And Pete talked about being around soldiers as if it was like being around angels. He really loved the military, and I saw them in a different way by talking to Pete. I saw them as actually our noble and honorable protectors, that the good guys in the military did not want to support this nefarious Satanism, this crazy stuff that was going on that they were very aware of. Remember that even before 9/11 took place, there were films going on inside all these places like Bohemian Grove and the Oval Office. They have all this damning video footage, all this documented evidence, and that evidence is going to come out. So we are right on the threshold of getting the freedom that we deserve and the freedom that we've worked so hard to achieve. I honor Pete Peterson as our fallen hero. I honor Ward. I honor Ross Perot and the work that he apparently did in making this alliance happen and making it possible. It has been a very low-funded operation for a long time. The current president was not a politician. He was brought in because it was either that or they were going to do a military coup against the president of the time. And this was all decided about 3.5 years ago now, to approach him and to say, can you self-finance your own campaign? You already have a public figure presence. People know who you are. We're gonna tell you, what's really going on. He was given a 2-week briefing. He was shown all kinds of horrible stuff, and he agreed to do it. So I don't usually get too excited about presidents. I mean, I was really hoping that Obama could do some good for the country, and a lot of people got angry at me about that. And now I'm talking about the current president, and I'm saying, you know what? Maybe there's more to this than just the negative view that the media gives us. Maybe there's something else. Oh, people get so upset.
Can you talk about how Pete wasn't sick?
Yeah. So I can talk about that. So I talked to Pete like 2 weeks ago.
So Pete, I just want to confirm that today is June 6th, 2019. This is a conversation that we're having. You are not being threatened or coerced in any way. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
What's something you can do to tell us that you can confirm that it's June 6th, 2019?
Well, I can tell you that my calendar's sitting here checked off up to today, which is June the 6th.
Well, we just had give me a current event or something that's fairly current that's in the news that would confirm the date.
Well, one of the main things is that the president has just had a meeting with the Queen.
That's true.
In England. And a number of things were talked about, and he talked more sensibly than he's talked in a long time.
I got a recording of him. You can listen to it. I'm going to release it when I get back. I'm here for 3 weeks to finish my book. But Pete sounded fine. I mean, he said there was no pain. He did not appear to have any degenerative conditions. They were tweaking his dentures to get him to fit right. He was happy about that. We had discussed coming out and taping him to talk about all this new stuff that he wanted to disclose.
Well, let me just ask you this. How would you feel about us coming out there at some point fairly soon and getting some tapings done? Do you think that would be possible?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Do you think that the hospital staff there would be cooperative, that they'd let us do that?
Oh, yeah.
Like
they wouldn't have anything to do with it. We'd go do them somewhere else.
Right. So rather than doing like a private room at that facility, we would probably just want to take you somewhere else, and they're not going to get in the way.
Either way, I could do it either way.
Okay.
They like me. I'm paying $7,000 a month for this.
Really?
Yeah.
He was totally excited about that. We did it over open lines. We did it on the telephone. I had talked to Ward over open lines through text communications. And both those guys end up dead on the same day. And this is the kind of stuff, this is really like the third time that we've had a cluster of deaths all at once. One of them was around the time that we lost William Tompkins. And there was another one recently, Carl Wolf, the guy who was the whistleblower for Disclosure Project, where he saw photographs of ruins on the moon that were clearly not really ruins. They were active bases, actually, extraterrestrial bases. So he died by getting hit by a truck on his bicycle, and then Preston Nichols died like almost to the same day, and he's the guy that was the Montauk whistleblower. And then my whistleblower, Daniel, nearly died that day. His tongue swelled up 3 times its size, became hard as a rock, and he has almost succumbed to cancer, but thankfully he's still around. So this is a war. This is real. I try not to get too angry about people who, in their own ignorance, accuse us of making this all up or that we're just trying to make money. Anyway, this has become kind of long, but Pete Peterson was our original guy that started telling us about the Alliance in 2009, and he gave us lots of briefings about underground bases being destroyed, about military hardware not being able to start, tanks that wouldn't start, planes that wouldn't start, all this high-level interference to stop these cabal guys from doing the end of the world. And the Alliance has steered it beautifully. This is apolitical. It does not have to do with the current president. He's just happening to be somebody who is involved right now in helping an agenda that has been ongoing since the 1950s that they called the Plan, 5-inch thick binder of how to pull this thing off, which has obviously adapted quite a bit as time goes on. It's amazing because they're going to do it all fully legally. And if you go back to the infamous, as I've made it infamous now, quote 2700 from these Q posts, what you see there is that they are going to make this all public. The public is going to learn everything. So the next stage, you know, Uncle Jeffy's just the beginning. Ordinary people are going to be learning about horrible things that are going to make them very upset. It's important that we work together with each other to stay happy, to keep going to work, to keep taking care of our kids, to get out of bed, to get past the grief, because this is really going to upset people as they learn these things. Anyway, it is upsetting that we lost Pete. I am not going to be deterred. We are not stopping. We will not respond to threats and intimidation. And I want to speak to one last thing while I still have our beautiful set here. Yeah, I'm calling it a set. So see, on mine, I'm like a filmmaker, right? So anyway, I can come over this way a little more. It is also very important to point out that when all these attacks started online, talking about Pete Peterson and that I had stolen his money, which is so ridiculous. I'd given him $18,000 of my own money. I didn't even create the fundraiser. It was created by somebody calling themselves Coco Luau. And Coco Luau handed it over to me, and the amount of BS that we had to go through with GoFundMe just for me to be allowed to transfer money to Pete's bank account was crazy. There's no way that GoFundMe would have ever allowed me to transfer it to any other account but Pete's, and it took us a lot of work even to get that done. So anyway, those attacks started happening right after Pete got transferred from Genesis Center to Cascadia of Boise. And we didn't know where he went, and in fact the people at Genesis told us, we can't even tell you if he's still alive, and we can't tell you where he went. One of Pete's friends, who's the guy that called me and told me that he had died, actually was able to talk to somebody at the center and get them to admit to where Pete went. But all the attacks started after Pete was missing, presumed dead. So I'm very, very grateful that we tracked him down. He was at Cascadia. He was in the Alpine Wing. I talked to him on the phone in his room, recorded it, and got him to say that I did not steal his money, talking about, you know, him coming forward, these new disclosures he wanted to do, and in 6 months he could say anything he wanted. So I think we are on the verge of the most stunning events in human history, disclosures like we never could have imagined, and I am really, really excited about that. It's getting cold, and so we got to go. And again, Pete, I want to honor you as a soldier, as an American hero. Thank you for your service. God bless you, Pete Peterson. And we will see you on the other side. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this film-length movie. We are very excited over here. I mean, to see all these things coming together, despite the tragic loss of Pete Peterson, it is very encouraging. The fact that this Hawk hybrid air underwater craft has been declassified and patented, that the guy who filed the patent also did free energy, and his name translates as the savior of our nation. And then on December 8th, we actually have the top civilian in the Air Force saying that they're going to declassify the secret space programs, that there's all this stuff, and that it will rally public support for the need for a space force to make us understand there's a threat. I mean, this is very, very exciting. This is what we've been hearing about. Look at the convergence between the technologies being certified as operable from the Navy and Dr. James Sheehy, the Chief Technology Officer, saying that, and then understand how all of this is converging and what does it mean for us. What does it mean to have a future where these technologies are real, where they work, and where we're using them in our everyday lives? It's going to be totally, totally amazing. And this fits in with the overall concept of ascension, the idea of all these ancient prophecies that have talked about a golden age, that something will happen to us on Earth that is totally fantastic, totally remarkable, transforms our civilization in ways that even now we could never even imagine. And we have done a movie about this. So apart from the 501c3 aspect, which is what this video is, it's nonprofit, it's free, we also have a for-profit project, which is The Cosmic Secret. Now this film, I'm really, really proud of it. I star in it extensively. We have a bunch of other insiders in there as well. Dr. Michael Salla, we have Jordan Sather, just a really great team. Corey Good is in the movie as well. And what you're going to see in this movie is a lot of great production value, a lot of great B-roll, very relaxing, meditative soundtrack, and a storyline about the cosmic history of our solar system and ascension. There's never been a movie like this made before about ascension. We went to #1 21 minutes after it was released. But as of today, we found out that Facebook has banned us from advertising this film for life. The only reason that they gave was just violation of their policies, but it doesn't even make any sense because we're not doing anything that hasn't already been talked about in various other forms before. This movie is essentially a recapitulation of data, but in a very nice form. So, come on. You're going to ban this movie? It's very, very bizarre. Our advertising manager says they've never seen anything like it. We're bringing the best people together. We're talking about things that we have talked about before, but it's still a work of art, very much worthy of consideration and viewing. So when they ban something, that gives you a pretty good idea of what you need to be looking at, in my opinion. So, without further ado, I bring you the movie trailer for The Cosmic Secret, and I hope you can step up and help us out. We are under attack, and your viewing of this movie does help us tremendously. So, thank you for watching, and we will see you in another video, and hopefully check out the